Our reading today is from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 20, reading from verses 1 through to 16. It's entitled, "The Workers in the Vineyard." "So you see," Jesus continued, "the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed with the workers to give them a dinar a day and sent them off to his vineyard. He went out again in the middle of the morning and saw some others standing in the marketplace with nothing to do. 'You too can go to the vineyard,' he said, 'and I'll give you what's right.' So off they went. He went out again about midday and then in the middle of the afternoon and did the same. Then, with only an hour of the day left, he went out and found other people standing there. 'Why are you standing here all day with nothing to do?' he asked them. 'Because no one has hired us,' they replied. 'Well,' he said, 'you too can go into the vineyard.' Now when evening came, the vineyard owner said to his servant, 'Call the workers and give them their pay. Start with the last and go on to the first.' So the ones who had worked for 1 hour came, and each of them received a dinar. When the first ones came, they thought they would get something more, but they too each received a dinar. And when they had been given it, they grumbled against the landowner. 'This lot who came last,' they said, 'have only worked for 1 hour. And they have been put on a level with us, and we did all the hard work all day and in the heat as well.' 'My friend,' he said to one of them, 'I'm not doing you any wrong. You agreed with me on 1 dinar, didn't you? Take it. It's yours and be on your way. I want to give this fellow who came at the end the same as you. Or are you suggesting that I'm not allowed to do what I like with my own money? Or are you giving me the evil eye because I'm good?' So those who were the last will be first, and those who are the first will be last." Amen. And may God add his blessing to this reading from his holy word. Now, how often have you seen a child fold their arms, stamp their foot and exclaim, "It's not fair," when they perceive a slight injustice? They might be getting called in for their dinner when they're playing with friends, but their friend is allowed to play for longer than they are, and it's not fair. Or they've got a different bedtime from their elder sibling. It's not fair they get to stay up later. Or it's not fair that it's the middle of winter and they want an ice cream, but their parent says it's too cold for ice cream, despite the fact they've just seen 2 ministers walking by eating ice cream cones. Not guilty. It's not fair. But hey, it's the best time of year to eat ice cream because it's not going to melt on you. Children seem to have a natural sense of fairness. They know when something's just not fair. Now, after centuries of unfairness, we're starting to get to grips with the idea of equality and fairness are the right and the proper thing. It's right and proper that people receive equal pay for the work they do. Now, I'm not saying we're there yet, but we're hopefully heading in the right sort of direction. Now, I own a sewing machine, and I'm not going to profess to be a great sewing machinist, but I've knocked up a few items in the past which I've even surprised myself with. From the curtains in the man's bedroom, to a bag that I made, and even a waistcoat. When I don't know what I'm doing, I can always turn to YouTube But I know that I'm not that skilled. And I also know my way around fixing an engine, but again, I'm not that skilled, and again, I'll resort to the Haynes manual to work out what the problem is. But which of these tasks is the more skilled? Personally, I would say that sewing is more skilled, but that's more a reflection on my abilities or inabilities. But back in 1968, this debate had more lasting implications. At the Ford Dagenham plant, the women who sewed the car seats and interiors were regraded so that they would receive less money. They would be classed as Category B, less skilled production, instead of Category C, more skilled production. And on top of that, their pay would be 15% less than the equivalent man at the same grade. Now, what's more important in a car, the seat or the engine? You can't really use one without the other, so the women went on strike. And after 3 weeks of industrial action, the women eventually won a small pay rise before coming up to the same rate as Category B workers the following year. But it would take until 1984 before they were classed finally as skilled workers. But it was the strike by the women of Dagenham that would bring about the Equal Pay Act of 1970. It was only right and fair that the women should receive the same pay as the men. So the situation at Ford wasn't right and it wasn't fair. But it still took years for that particular situation to be resolved, and really, despite all the legislation since, there is still that pay gap out there. There's still instances of discrimination going on, be it down to race or gender or family status. And some of it's illegal, but it still exists. People should be paid what they're due. So the story of the workers in a vineyard is a bit troubling, especially to a former union man like myself. Surely if the workers were paid by the hour, they would be getting an appropriate hourly rate. 1 hour for 1 dinar, 2 hours for 2 dinar. But here the last and the first workers to be hired are paid the same. And those who turned up first are a wee bit miffed. Now, God is often used as the image of the vineyard owner, and it would appear that the vineyard owner is being unfair here, where those who've worked for longer are being paid less per hour than those who turned up later. But here's the thing, God doesn't pick favourites. We are all his favourite, and the reward that God has for us is so great, it would fill our cup many times over. And when God fills our cup to overflowing, he also fills the cups of those who call upon him to overflowing too. And just remember, God's favours often extend to those who we perhaps not approve of, because God is the Father of all. So perhaps it's time to look at the world the way God looks at his creation, with the loving eyes of a parent. God will do anything for his children, even sending his own dear Son to save us. So give thanks for the abundant blessings that God bestows on us, and don't worry about those around us. Amen.